Welcome to Taking the Higher Road, a podcast by DriverReach in partnership with FreightWaves. I'm your host, Jeremy Reymer, founder of DriverReach, a modern software solution at the intersection of recruiting and compliance. With over 20 years in the trucking industry, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side, I bring a wealth of expertise around all things recruiting, retention, and compliance. And on this show, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges from recruiting and retention to regulatory compliance. Your positive feedback keeps me motivated, so don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road on your preferred platform. Now, this week, I'm honored to be joined by a good friend who's making a big difference in people's lives, a man who's on a mission for people to wake up to the importance of sleep, the medical director at the Indiana Sleep Center, the sleep vigilante himself, Dr. Abhinav Singh. I'm honored to have you on the show, Dr. Singh. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Jeremy.
Well, for a man who's dedicated to sleep, you are tireless. In addition to your role at the Indiana Sleep Center, you're also a clinical assistant professor at Marian University College of Osteopathic Medicine. You're a fellow of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. You've received a top doctor award in sleep medicine the past 4 years. You serve on the medical review panel for sleepfoundation.org, and you're a sleep physician for the NBA team, the Indiana Pacers. You're a busy man. Do you even get enough sleep yourself?
I try, and it's about discipline and repeat effort. So more often than not, I am successful, but some nights are tough, just like with every human.
Well, you say discipline, vitamin D, you refer to that as vitamin D. Now, this is such an important topic, so especially for the trucking industry. I'd certainly love to learn about your 360 degrees of sleep awareness, that philosophy. As the author of a recently released book, Sleep to Heal, I'd love to unpack so much of the great content about the importance of sleep, what happens when we don't get enough sleep, how we can embrace proper sleep, and debunk, some popular sleep myths out there. We can also discuss the prevalence of sleep apnea, especially in the trucking industry, and its role in contributing to the jaw-dropping 61-year-old life expectancy of a CDL driver. My hope at the end of this conversation is that our audience comes away with a new appreciation for this universal restorative experience we call sleep. Do you think we can accomplish all that in our short time here?
Absolutely. I've done it before, and we'll do it again. And this is a tough ask, but hey, sleep will heal.
That's right. Well, with every guest I've had on the show, I always start off by asking for a book recommendation and something they've read that's been impactful to them. But obviously, in your case, I want to talk about your book, which is fantastic, by the way. I shared that with you when I first got it, when I first read it. What was your inspiration for writing Sleep to Heal?
So Sleep to Heal, yes, I see you have a copy. So that's lovely to see, Jeremy. Thank you for that. It's an honor that you read it and sent me some feedback. Twofold. I would say the inspiration was twofold. Somewhere about 5 or 6 years ago, I often found myself repeatedly recommending, books from various stalwarts in the field about sleep as an alternative to screens and stimulation at the evening hour, right? Because we're inundated with screens and lights and often led to sleep difficulties. So I often found, recommending book A, B, C, D so that the mind can stay anchored onto something that's pleasant and predictable and less stimulating. That's point one. Point two, I became repeatedly finding myself using analogies to teach patients about their sleep disorders using examples from their lives. So again, now suddenly my analogy bag grew very heavy and big and entertaining, to say the least, to a point where a patient just stood up and said, hey, where is your book? And that just rung a bell. It was an aha moment. I said, yeah, where is my book? So the journey began, and with a good dear friend, Charlotte Jensen, and we got together and finished this in about 1.5 years, and it's available from June this year. So it's a proud moment of mine. It's a life achievement, I would say.
Well, it's very well written and it's very engaging. And you mentioned the analogy bag. You absolutely have a ton of great analogies. We'll probably touch on a few of those, but I highly recommend it to the audience. Not only is it great for everyone in our industry, but certainly every human on the planet. And so there's a lot to unpack from the book. So perhaps we can dive in there. So now, personally, I've become increasingly passionate about health, longevity, especially as I work in an industry where so many are dying or suffering. And also because I've crossed the half-century mark myself and would definitely like to see my children grow old and enjoy grandchildren. So you make the point that sleep is medicine. And we often understand the importance of nutrition and exercise, but sleep is often overlooked as that third critical component of achieving, optimal health and well-being. My question, I guess, to you is where does sleep rank in importance among nutrition, exercise, and sleep, those three critical elements of quality life?
So call me biased. I look at sleep as the first block in your Lego box. So for those who've played Lego, it's the first piece. That's on which you start to build. So, or your first Jenga block, or the chassis of your truck. Let's put it like that. You guys are in the trucking industry. You know how important the chassis and the first frame is on which the entire structure gets built. So very simply put, it's a third of your life, right? And it's the first third, I want to say. The second 2/3 of your life are really, very importantly, exercise and nutrition, critical. And we're born with the skill to eat. Nobody teaches us. We are born with the skill to sleep. Nobody teaches us. So it must be that important that the creators and the creation has put the piece of sleep in your being. And therefore, you can have the best nutrition, you can have the best exercise routine, but if your sleep is of poor quality, ask yourself the question, do you think that exercise and that nutrition will yield the maximum benefit? The short answer is probably not. And so I would say it's fundamental to good exercise and nutrition.
So you reference two kinds of sleep deprivation. That's, a lot of the challenges that people have, acute and chronic. Can you share just what those are and how they differ?
So acute sleep deprivation is very easy to spot. That all-nighter that you had to, put into for the exam or for the early morning, the flight you had to catch at 5 a.m. or the red eye. So those are very obvious, instant effects. So cognitive, you're tired, you're hungry, you're angry, you're just sleepy the next day. Physically and mentally, you're just exhausted the next day. You can feel it. As we age, it gets harder to recover, believe it or not. Every passing decade, it's like suspensions on a wonderful truck. They will wear as you push them through more. So it takes a few days to recover. It's easy to spot. It's not, I have had one all-nighter and I just need to put in some extra hours. Mathematically, I'm good. It's really not that. It takes a few days. So note that. Second, the chronic sleep deprivation is more dangerous, in my opinion. The chronic sleep deprivation is, I need 7.5 or 8. I regularly get 6. It's that individual, right? So 6 hours out of 7 or 8, it basically means, it seems like 1 hour less. Doesn't seem like much. However, if you just look at basic sleep physiology, most of your dream sleep, REM sleep, happens in the last 2 hours of your night. So you may be getting 80% of your REM sleep in the last 2 hours. If you shaved off that 1 hour, you suddenly may have lost half of your REM sleep or dream sleep. That's when physiologically, mood, memory, learning, certain parts of it are actually consolidating. And so that you may lose. And if you lose it chronically, that's when you start to open doors into anxiety, depression, poorer judgment, metabolic issues, learning issues. So yeah, that's more dangerous. And people don't see that because the effect is not immediate like the acute sleep deprivation. So those are the two kinds, and it's dangerous. Both are dangerous.
Well, in the book, there's the analogy bag that you speak of. There's a number of them that I think they're used to really help us better shape how we view sleep. And one of those is a reference to driving on a bad road filled with potholes. And I know our audience can relate to that for sure. How do you tie snoring and sleep apnea to potholes on a road?
Yeah, I love this one. It's been with me for forever now. And I think it's just wonderful. So snoring, I say, is like potholes on a road. I say this line 5 times a week. So it's almost like a poetry in motion now, not to be bragging. But snoring is like potholes on a road. Is it common? Yes. Are potholes common? Yes. So is snoring. But every pothole doesn't break your truck. Now, certain potholes get worse than the others. So as the snoring gets worse, the impact to the car hitting them is higher. Now, when you see a pothole, what does the driver try to do? They try to go around it, over it, beside it, right? The same way, but when you're sleeping, you can't do that. So every time you snore, there's a vibration at the back of your throat. And that's the collapse. The body panics, the oxygen drops, it jolts you with adrenaline, and you go, and this repeatedly happens. So it's like your truck is hitting pothole after pothole after pothole. No matter how good the maintenance is, how good your truck is, how good your tires are, eventually you're going to have more servicing and repairs. And the servicing and repairs I describe them as appetizers and main course when it comes to snoring and sleep apnea. The appetizers are when you have a lot of snoring and sleep apnea and breathing events that are unchecked: dry mouth, headaches, bathroom breaks, fatigue, sleepiness, judgment errors, microsleeps, transportation errors actually have been studied, higher risk of accidents, bathroom breaks at night. These are just appetizers, first 7-10 years. And then the next decade is heart attack, stroke, blood pressure rises, forced blood pressure medicine, a trip to the hospital with heart issues. It just goes on. So that's why they're like potholes on a road. They're never good for any vehicle, big or small. You hit enough, you break enough.
So it's a really good point, an analogy, as I said, that I think everybody listening here can relate to. And on that note, just speaking of roads, one of the things that I learned in the book, I didn't realize this, but there's actually a law on the books in New Jersey called Maggie's Law that makes driving a car after being awake for 24 hours, that's a criminal offense. And I think you mentioned Arkansas also enacted some similar legislation. You know, we're talking 10 years or so ago, but it's obviously a big enough deal that it's being, referenced and laws are passed to prevent it.
Yeah, very few though. More action is needed. The 4 Ds, deadly Ds of driving. We've spoken about this. The first deadly D is, drunk. So of course there's a law against that. Drugged driving. Of course there's a law against that. And then the third is distracted. So phones, other things. There are laws in many, many states now that you can't be on an active device while driving. But the fourth deadly D of driving is drowsy driving. And very few laws, like you say. So you can count on your fingertips how many states have good laws against it. Sadly, we need to do more.
So and back to the analogies, you also reference an analogy of a personal sleep elevator with 8 floors representing 8 hours of sleep. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that is really educational for kind of to your point earlier about what is happening at these different stages and why it's so important, why each of them are so important.
Yes, again, the design is just fantastic. So the first half of the night, let's say 4 hours, let's pick 8 for the purposes of calculation. Remember, 7 to 9 is what fits most adults. 8 is an easier, even number to chase. So even if you miss and you get 7, 7.5, you'll generally be okay. The elevators I describe as, the first floor, second floor, third, fourth, all the way up to 8 is deeper and more restorative sleep as you get higher. And remember, the 8th floor is the penthouse, right? So if you got to 8, who doesn't like hanging out in a penthouse on an Airbnb if you were to get upgraded, right? So I tell people that. And as you get higher and higher, the accommodations get more luxurious for your own health. And the accommodations are basically your health, right? So the returns on your health. And as you start sleeping, the brain waves start to get slower and bigger. That's how we know physiology. So we have these stages, 1, 2, 3, and dream sleep, dream state, REM sleep, where actually the brain gets faster, quicker for a little bit, and then again goes to slower, bigger. And then again revs up and slow. It's like, a car parked in neutral and the driver keeps tapping the accelerator on neutral to just rev up the engine and warm it up. And then, so it's interesting. And every state, so the first half, a lot of repair takes place in the body, growth and repair. So growth hormone releases are very high in the first 3 to 4 hours when you're getting this enriching slow wave sleep, it's called. And at that point, you're having a lot of pro-inflammatory chemicals releasing. So that means all your germs, your infections are being cleared and your fatigue is being, removed. Your muscles are being repaired. All the toxins are being removed. Trash is being removed. Second half, a lot of anti-inflammatory chemicals get released. And we've talked a lot about that in aging world, right? So anti-inflammatory chemicals are now collecting all that warfare that has taken place between your soldiers and the infections and the, external intruders in the body. That cleanup takes place. So that it takes a full 4 hours like a washing machine. So once you cut your sleep short, you're losing the last hour. The balance tilts between pro-inflammation and less of anti-inflammation. So now you're getting a pro-inflammatory state. Again, a danger of chronic sleep deprivation. So these are the sort of the very oversimplified ways of looking at it, but nevertheless important ways of looking at it. That's why that 8-hour, luxury elevator takes you to these stages, and you need the whole complement complete that full sleep cycle of yours every night.
Well, you reference brainwashing or pressure washing that takes place. I think of the streets of New Orleans, and I like to go. I love New Orleans. There's a lot of history, really neat architecture, but I like to go at like 7 a.m. I like to get out on the street and go and have some coffee and walk around. It's beautiful, but it's after they've hosed the whole city down, all of the filth from the night before. it's kind of like the same concept. And so, you referenced that pressure washing. Why is that often a neglected stage, so critical? I mean, I know you touched on it being that, the issue there being the imbalance, but I know sometimes the quantity of sleep is adequate, but I know you also referenced that the quality is often insufficient. Can you touch on that a little?
Yes, absolutely. So before we forget, the Café du Monde and the beignets of New Orleans are second to none. So I highly recommend people try that. I tried it once, have never found anything better. Back to the pressure washing, right? So once you get into the stage 1, 2, and 3 states of sleep, the stage 3 state is called slow wave or delta sleep, where the frequency is very slow of these brain waves and the amplitude is really high. And it was discovered about 10 years ago or so that the cerebrospinal fluid in which your brain bathes actually increases its pressure and flow through your brain. So imagine, and also they found that the brain cells actually shrink a little. So when they shrink a little, there's gaps that open up and the pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid is higher through it. And you have about 80 billion neurons in your brain, okay? And every time you spend 16 hours waking, there's a lot of metabolic waste produced called beta amyloid. And we know now that if this beta amyloid doesn't get cleared down the road, it fuels the risk of Alzheimer's. So these are tangles. It's like you put your trash out every week, pick your day, and they skip a couple of, weeks in a month. And then what happens? The trash continues to build, right? So that's the overflow tangles we talk about as risk for Alzheimer's. So this higher pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid is essential in cleaning these built up amyloids. So that's what I talk about as pressure washing, and that's critical. And if you don't let yourself get to those deep states of sleep, you will accumulate those waste products and increase risk for Alzheimer's. That's why it's important to not neglect that.
Well, I recall there was a big push in the trucking industry, I'd say around maybe 2010 or so, where sleep apnea and its prevalence was widely discussed. And in fact, there was a proposed plan for mandatory sleep apnea screening for train operators, I know bus and truck drivers, but I believe that was abandoned several years ago. But this isn't just a trucking issue, right? You referenced in your book that about 1/3 of us don't get enough sleep. And that's a lot of people who need help. And you also say that sleeping 5 hours or less per night equals a faster death. What are some of the, can you touch on some of the detrimental effects of chronic sleep loss? I mean, that's, again, so many people that this impacts.
I'll say 3 things, and there's so much to unpack here. So constantly sleeping less, which is less than 5 hours a night for whatever reason, hastens the calcium deposits. It goes back to my pro-inflammatory state discussion. Remember? So you need 4 and 4, but if you just got 5, you got more of the pro-inflammation, less of the anti. Now the trash is stuck, right? So calcium deposits in your coronary arteries are multiple times faster if you sleep less, equal to blockages, equal to heart attacks. No wonder you see these healthy, high-flying, entrepreneurs suddenly have a rapid coronary event because they're not sleeping, right? How many times do you see that? Almost once or twice a year, you see a high-flying CEO suddenly found with a heart attack and looked healthy on the surface and go, right? So that's one risk of chronic sleep loss. The second is sleep apnea. Yes, again, it's one of those untapped potentials of improving our health, especially in the trucking world and transportation world, that 1 in 5 or 6 is expected in the general population to have sleep apnea. And if you take 1 in 5, that's 20%, 1/5 of 300 million, almost 60 million people expected to have, and only 1/5 of that have been actually diagnosed. So now 12 million, and only 1/5 of those 12 million are actually well treated. So now you're down to 2.5 million people well treated, and the other 40 some plus million not treated. And now this is general population. You take the trucking world, the risk factors just double up on you. They are male, sometimes heavier, not sleeping well, lesser active lifestyles. Now the sleep apnea risk is higher. And there is almost a 3 times higher risk of accidents on the road if you have untreated sleep apnea, along with falling asleep on the wheel, which is really not what we're looking for. We're looking for concentration lapses. We're looking for judgment errors, micro sleeps. Just a few seconds, half a second can create an error between a successful braking and, a rear end. As simple as that and more.
Well, you highlight also, 50 ways that sleep makes you happy. And I would say after reading that, it's hard to not get pumped up about getting consistent, adequate sleep. Not only is it important for each individual, in the trucking world, there's also a significant benefit to driver retention, performance, reduced expenses with lower healthcare costs. You talked about crash risk that exists, higher crash risk. When CDL drivers, and I know you've dealt with drivers, when CDL drivers are told that they need to get screened, they're always frustrated, they're disgruntled. What's been your experience with screening drivers, and how can we better educate the industry to see that this scenario, to see this through a different lens?
That's when the 360 degrees of sleep awareness comes in. Exactly. So if you dial back 15 years, when I started working here almost, I would have the angry driver in my office, right? Not even sitting. He would be standing. Why are you? Oh, hi, Mr. Smith. I see you're a commercial truck driver. What brings you in? Of course, I know what brought him in. I would ask, as opening question. I don't know why I'm here. That would be the standard response. I'm here because my DOT examiner wants to do this. It's the government. They blame, like it's the institution. It's my company. They'll blame everyone else, right? Do you snore? Are you tired? No, no. Have you ever had have you ever had a drowsy driving incident? No, no. Angry, like ready to leave. They'll fill zeros on everything, right? So like, no, no, no. And then we say, why don't we just do a screening test? Yes, there is you're a little heavier. The neck is a little, larger than 16, 17 inches. I see a bit of risk. Let's just screen and you'll be on your way. And then I teach them a little about the sleep apnea. I give them my snoring and potholes. I give them, they are going to retire at some point. They would need some health left over to enjoy their retirement. They're working hard. Fine. I'd get a little bit of buy-in and we do the sleep test. Of course, it would return many times as severe sleep apnea. And then we'd, encourage them to try the treatments because DOT would mandate they have to at least be compliant with treatment before they can get their CDL renewed. They would do that and they would feel good. They would come back in a completely different sort of mood in the next, 60 days. Like, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. I felt so much better. I said, yes, doesn't it feel like driving with the handbrakes up all the time and now somebody lowered the handbrakes, things get easier? They said, absolutely. So this was 15 years ago. A lot of battle used to happen. Now, I'm pleased to say that they'll say, yeah, I need to do this. How soon can you get this done? I have 60 days, 90-day extensions. I know Johnny tried this. It was really worked well for him. Fine, I'll do it. My wife's been bugging me. And fine. So it's a lot softer now to explain to them because they know someone who went through this, thank God, who's had a good result. So that's the difference. And a healthy driver, is a happier driver, is a more productive driver, and is a driver who loves their company and, who wants to do more for you. So, and why not? And they feel cared.
It's the right thing to do. I mean, I think for a whole lot of other reasons too, but fundamentally, it's the right thing to do. And I'd say you also have a chapter on the importance of children's health and sleep. And, as we discussed, this is a human issue, not just for CDL drivers. I'm sure there are many listeners who have young children who can benefit from the education that you share in the chapter for children. Now, we just have a couple minutes left, so I do want to get to a lightning round here where we can debunk, or at least reference a few of the myths out there. First one, I just need a couple shots of whiskey to sleep great. How do you debunk that?
It feels very good on the surface. Alcohol is a little sedating, but alcohol is a double-edged sword. You may feel drowsy for the first hour or two, but the next 4 or 6, when alcohol breaks down, it acts like darts into your brain. Find me one person, Jeremy, who said, I had 6 shots of tequila. I feel great this morning. I feel great. Not even, right? Not even 4 beers. Everybody generally feels worse because the quality is very poor of the alcohol-laden sleep. Therefore, it doesn't work. Otherwise, there would be no sleep problems.
Well, and so another myth is I don't need much sleep. 6 hours works for me, which I think, to be fair, you've already addressed that one pretty well. So let's move to the last one, which is I'm not heavy, so I couldn't possibly have sleep apnea.
Fantastic. I love this one, and I hear it 5 times a week. It's the same myth which says I'm not heavy, I can't have diabetes. I don't smoke, I can never have lung cancer. It's something like that. Not true. So everything in medicine has 3 risk factor buckets, as I call it. The first one is modifiable. So weight, lifestyle choices, right, is a common risk factor. The other 2 are not in your control. There is family history and genetics. So father, mother, brother who snored, uncle, aunt. And then the other risk factor bucket for sleep apnea is anatomy, right? So your narrow jaw, your narrow airway space, larger tongue, all add. Being a man, being past 50, 60, 70 years of age can add to increased risk. So yes, heavy is 1/3 of the risk factors, not the rest.
Well, I think one of the purposes of your book is obviously to educate the world and certainly everyone who reads the book, just how important this is. And no doubt the more we can properly educate, promote, and encourage accountability, we can make a really big difference in improving the quality of lives and actually do something about that terrible 61-year life expectancy for truck drivers. Again, I encourage the audience to purchase and read Sleep to Heal. They can learn a lot more about not just the book and how to buy the book, but also a lot more about so much other valuable content that you put out at sleepvigilante.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Singh. I really admire your passion, your dedication to such an important topic. You're saving lives. Thank you.
Loved being here. Thank you.
And thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the Higher Road and for spreading the word to your industry peers. We really appreciate it. Remember, you can submit any question or comments, including those which may appear on upcoming deeper dive segments at podcast@driverreach.com. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.